the most critical thing you can do is to learn to be 100% responsible for your own life. Working with what you have, it is 100% your responsibility to achieve the things you want to achieve.
Hey, good afternoon, guys. This is Eric LeClaire over at Push Press, and we are continuing our series of In the Trenches. We're exploring leadership principles, both in individuals who have either formerly owned a gym or have transitioned to fully autonomous online coaching. And we look at individuals who have provided education, certification, but also have produced real competent both clients and true athletes. You can't throw a stone without hitting someone that's been affected by Greg Everett. And if you've asked the coaches that I've personally worked with, I've walked around the gym with his book and would open to certain pages and say, look, this is why we do what we do. Yeah. For those that I can't imagine anyone not knowing you, Greg, but by all means, thank you for coming on today. Give us a little background. Let the audience today know a little bit about Catalyst Athletics.
Sure. Well, appropriately for this conversation, the first gym I was involved in, I actually co-owned the fourth CrossFit affiliate gym with Rob Wolf and his wife, Nikki. Yep. So that was going back to maybe late 2003, somewhere around there. So really different landscape than currently, but that was kind of my entrance into, the gym business. Right. I had been involved in training in one form or another for years. I'd been a personal trainer since I was 18. So I'd had, some kind of connection with that business, but that was the real entrance. I started Catalyst Athletics in 2006 down in Southern California when I was, training and being mentored by Mike Bergner, who was my weightlifting coach. And, the really generous guy who kind of took me under his wing and got me started as a weightlifting coach. And then my wife, Amy, and I opened the actual Catalyst Athletics gym in the San Francisco Bay Area in 2008. And we ran that until mid-2016 when we decided we were going to get out of the actual gym business. Relocated to Central Oregon at that time. And essentially, the Catalyst Athletics business had always entailed a lot of things besides the gym. So I was writing books and making videos and doing all the online content, seminars, things like that. So, had a lot of pans on the fire already. So at that point, we didn't really need the gym, the physical gym anymore. And so now she and I are coaching all of our competitive weightlifters remotely, while, keeping up on all the educational content and things like that. So that's kind of the current state of affairs.
So you had a chance, and very graciously, as you said, you were lucky enough to bump into Coach Bergner, and he provided you what? I mean, you figure a place to train, like significant mentorship. Did he pour into you little bits of like program design or how to manage the athlete through the season? Or was that stuff you were already reading about, learning, and studying?
That was both, certainly. I mean, the interesting thing about it is that it was never a formal arrangement, and there weren't times where we sat down and said, hey, let's talk about programming and things like that. It was more just like, I was his athlete. I was a competitive weightlifter that he was coaching. And it was clear that I was kind of on the path to becoming a coach at some point. And I think that he recognized that, and I recognized that. And so through that, there was kind of some maybe additional communication on why he was doing what he was doing, or a lot of the history of what he was doing. And, and this was stuff going back to his days at Notre Dame training under the legendary Father Lang. And so that's, I got a lot of the kind of the old school strength sport sort of indoctrination through his experiences, which is awesome. And was able to kind of bridge that gap between that generation, that era, that mindset, and, you know, the more modern iterations of that stuff, which is, I think, probably why I get along with the, you know, the multiple generations of coaches,
right,
while being sort of in the middle age-wise. But, you know, of course, there was also, you know, I had to go out there and make the effort on my own to see what else was out there, and just to learn. You know, I learned through doing. That's how I've always done it. I mean, to this day, partly because I just don't have a lot of spare time to go read and watch other people's stuff. I just don't. Like, I just sit there and tinker, you know, in the gym and with the classic Einstein thought experiment kind of approach, and try to figure stuff out. And it doesn't always work, of course. Like, I do a lot of stupid stuff, but you learn what not to do also, along with what, you know, does work.
So can you think back to a time where you had a chance to learn significant either principles or significant, like in your mind, you're like, man, that's probably one of the most important things I've learned. I'm going to keep that for myself. And that helped mold you into the coach or the business owner that you are today, whether it was from Mike or maybe it was from Rob or other people that you've come in contact with over the last, let's say, 20 years. Anything
it's funny, you know, people, I get asked a similar question to that a lot. And I can never think of specific moments, you know, like the classic aha moment. I feel like I've not, either I haven't really had many of them, or I don't recognize them at the time. You know what I mean?
Right.
And maybe it's just because I'm slow to process it. But to me, it's felt more like an evolution over time. And so it's never like I believe in a certain set of principles, and then suddenly there's this moment of demarcation when I go to believing a different principle. It's more like, you know, over time, through experience and experimentation and seeing the feedback and the results, that you adjust your approach, and you recognize flaws or shortcomings, or simply just ways that you can make things better. And I think, you know, my initial education in the sport of weightlifting was with Mike Bergner, right? And he had a certain way of doing things. And then I layered on top of that my personal experiences as a lifter, and then my growing experience helping other people, you know, as a burgeoning coach. And then, you know, I worked with Bob Morris for a year, who was the head women's coach at the Olympic Training Center years ago. So, you know, phenomenal coach. He coached, you know, Carissa Gump and Natalie Wolfhook, now Natalie Bergner, you know, a couple Olympians, and, you know, learned, you know, he had different approaches and different ways of thinking of things and explaining things and different ways of programming. And then, you know, having some interaction with Signet Smallshirts, the former Polish national coach, who was then the national coach at the U.S. Olympic Training Center for a while. And so it's more, to me, it's been more of just years and years of experimenting and getting the experience and kind of synthesizing, you know, all the little things that I pick up here and there from multiple sources, rather than, like a sudden revolutionary change in principle or perspective.
Right.
Maybe I'm doing it wrong. That's just how I've always done it.
Hey, I mean, look, I don't think anyone that's been in this around, I mean, we follow each other in interesting and very similar circles. And I would say you're not doing much wrong at all, at least at what Catalyst Athletics presents. I mean, so many folks are aware of the extensive work you do for your video, your library selection, so your exercise library selection, obviously your books. But what's the performance menu? Like, where did that come from?
That's funny, man. The performance menu is just this thing that chugs along in the background in my life. And it's almost like I'm still in school. Like, I have homework that's due every month, and I forget about it until the last second. So that was a Rob Wolf thing. Okay. So we launched that in February of 2005. So, I mean, we're over 15 years now that thing's been published every single month, which is insane to me. Nothing lasts for 15 years on the internet. No kidding. But so it initially was, essentially his idea was to have more of a nutrition-oriented supplement to the CrossFit Journal.
Right.
And, you know, I was basically brought on because I had the technical wherewithal to assemble that thing and deliver it.
Okay.
And, you know, early on, I wasn't really contributing much in terms of content. And then, you know, a couple of years down the line, I sold my share of the gym back to Rob and Nikki, and I bought them out of the Performance Menu. And that was when I had moved and started working with Bergner. And, you know, they were over it. They didn't want to deal with it anymore. I didn't want to, you know, own the gym anymore. I wasn't even there physically. So it was the perfect, you know, trade. And so, of course, when I took it over, it went more into the weightlifting, especially and training side of things. And of course, there's still nutrition involved, but so like the name Performance Menu is still kind of bugs me. Like it doesn't really reflect what we do, but I'm not going to change it after a couple of years. And so God knows how long that thing's going to keep going. Pretty much every couple months, I'm like, we should just shut this thing down.
Last one.
Yeah, but it's like, I've made it 15 years, so maybe I can squeeze 20 out of it. Like, that'd be crazy.
Right.
So we'll see. You know, luckily I have a great editor, Yael, who she's really the one who handles the day-to-day stuff. I'm pretty hands-off with it. You know, thankfully she's good at what she does and likes doing it. So if I had to actually run the show day-to-day, I would have pulled the plug on it years ago because I just don't have the time, you know.
No, I believe it. I can't imagine. Like, couldn't even begin to understand your workflow per week to be able to constantly and consistently not only do what you do from a professional standpoint, but then also, and we'll get into it here towards the end. I mean, there's a new book coming. There's obviously a new sport that you've been training for and preparing for. So there's like, how are you chunking down your day? If you can provide some insights to some of the coaches that may want to be advancing their offerings to others besides the coaching component. You write, you film, you produce, you edit, you are training yourself. How are you able to stay so organized and disciplined?
I mean, there's a lot of wanting to pull my own hair out moments for sure. Yeah. And it's, to be honest, it is the overarching ongoing struggle of my life is how to balance all this stuff and how to keep it organized and how to avoid getting completely burnt to a crisp, which it definitely happens from time to time. And I think the number one thing that I've done that has allowed me to do as many things as I'm doing at one time is to maximize the efficiency of each of those things however possible. And so that means automating as much as I can. So for example, like with my website and all that content, you know, I built the website years and years ago and I keep updating it. So I have built it to handle what I need to do precisely how I want to do it, which means the absolute minimum possible amount of tedious work to get the result that I need versus like using, you know, pre-existing software and then trying to kind of make it work for what I need. It's like I've reduced it to as few button clicks as necessary. And granted, from a programming perspective, it's probably incredibly clumsy and amateurish, but it works specifically for what I need. Right. So that's the biggest thing is just finding ways to streamline and automate everything you do as much as possible. I have Alyssa, who is a longtime employee. She was one of my earliest weightlifters, was a coach at our gym for a long time. She handles, you know, like most of the basic email customer service and order processing. So like little stuff like that, I don't have to deal with so much anymore.
You've delegated a lot of that out.
Yeah. And so it's like the real simple stuff that I can actually teach someone else to do. And that I have someone, fortunately, who's as reliable as she is and intelligent and can write an email without egregious grammatical and spelling mistakes and not put emojis in it, you know?
Yep.
That's really helpful. But then beyond that, you know, one of my big drives in life is is kind of collecting as many abilities as possible, right? Like I love being capable of doing a huge array of different things. I love being able to write books and to make videos and, hell, I'm going to make a documentary. Why not? I mean, it was a horrible experience, but I got it done. And I want to be able to, build shit and weld and, be able to do all these things that are totally unrelated, but you find over time that they are all related. Like you're able to pull lessons
here.
Right. You're really able to pull lessons from these seemingly disparate things and develop better ways of doing what you're doing in a way that's more enjoyable, it's more productive, it's more effective, and is less kind of mentally and emotionally taxing, which is the key too. So as far as like how my day is structured, generally what I do is the best thing I've been doing for the past couple years that's really helped me with kind of the reducing the hair pulling tendencies is every single morning, first thing I get up, I make my first cup of coffee. I go out on the back deck with my goofy little journal, and I sit there and I have my first cup of coffee, and I do my little journal protocol, which is quick and simple. It's basically, a few things I'm grateful for. A look at the previous day is, what did I do well? Am I living up to my standards? Where did I fall short? And then the last thing is, who am I today? What does this day look like? And it's kind of not really the Stuart Smalley positive self-affirmation sort of thing, but it's more like, this is what I expect of myself today. This is what I expect this day to be. And, so it's like you're spending the first part of your day not only trying to relax, like this is before I look at my computer, before I touch my phone, before I think of work, whenever possible, right? And kind of having that mental reset and having that kind of fresh perspective on the day and like, all right, let's go get some stuff done.
Right.
Then I'll come in and that first part of the day I'll dedicate to whatever like the primary project is. So, I just finished writing this new book. So for the last, 4 months or whatever it is, the first couple hours every morning, office door closed, no music, nothing, like we're writing a book.
Right.
Some days that meant a ton of words got done. Some days that meant a couple hundred. And I was sitting there like, I don't know how I'm going to get this done by the deadline sort of thing. And then usually I'll have a little bit of time after that and I'll handle kind of the time sensitive stuff. So, hey, here's some emails I have to get done right now, or here's a fix for the website I have to get done. Right. Then I'll go train, then I'll come back and do the rest of the work that I have to get done that day. And so really what it comes down to is organizing my day and organizing my work based on priority and urgency. Right. And then learning how to not allow yourself to procrastinate, which is something I still have trouble with. Oh, yeah. Right. Where it's like, there's this one task that I know I have to do, but I really don't want to do it. Or it's this daunting thing that, once you start, you're going to get sucked in for days and weeks. And it's like, so you keep the time's not quite right. But it's like one of the most important things I've learned recently is that the best thing you can do with that is just start it. Put your head down and plow forward. And then, you're going to be done with it by the time you would normally just be thinking about getting started, Yeah,
agreed. Totally, man. Well, in that grand, that space from waking to sleep, where do you have the most fun? Is training still fun for you?
Yeah, by and large, that's the thing that I look forward to in the day. It doesn't mean I don't have training days where I'm miserable and I'm like, why do I do this to myself? But yeah, that's my time to kind of like put the phone away, not worry about emails and other people's problems. And of course, Amy and I both coach a good number of people. So it's like being a parent to a shitload of kids where it's like you're constantly feeling responsible for other people and helping them and ensuring that their lives are going well. And it's exhausting. I'm not saying I don't love it, but it's really draining. So that's my time to kind of like turn that stuff off and focus on myself for a while and try to have fun. And if it's not fun in the conventional sense of the word, it's at least enjoyable in the sense that I know I'm committing myself to doing something to improve, right?
So how much of your training today is focused on the new sport, and how much, like at home? Obviously, I see it obviously happening in your garage, outside. You get to the range? I don't think I've, no?
I do, but I just don't post that stuff.
Right.
Number one, because it's one of those things where it is, it's certainly not my strong suit, right?
I see.
Like I do as well as I do with the tactical game stuff because of my physical ability.
Right.
And I just barely hang on with my shooting ability, you know?
Right.
And people always look at me funny when I tell them I do that. They're like, do you even like shooting? I'm like, that's okay. Like that's not really the part of it that draws me to it. It's that specific combination of abilities.
Sure.
And it's the fact that it is this thing that I don't have a background in that is very difficult for me. And so it's the challenge, right? Where it's something totally new and difficult and unexpected. And it's like, I got to figure this out while doing all this other stuff.
Right.
And then also, of course, I just don't want to deal with the social controversial side of guns and things. And it's an ongoing dilemma for me, honestly. Like, so many of the people I've met through this are just like these wonderful people. I've met friends and things like that. But so many of the people that I encounter, because they think, well, he has a gun, so he must think like me. I'm like, no, man, you got this really wrong. And so it's been a really weird experience in that sense.
How did you stumble into, obviously I would say 90% of the folks that know you, read you, right? Like that, in the weightlifting world, the CrossFit world, they know you around the barbell. So how did you stumble into the tactical games? Cause it's only in its second year?
It's really in its infancy still. So my best friend, Mike, who, up until recently coached a couple of Catalyst lifters, Sam Kleinschmidt was the big one.
Right.
We go back, we both come from Mike Bergner's gym, but he's a lifetime Navy guy. He was a corpsman. He's up in Washington now, really into shooting and stuff. He's the one who found it. And he signed up for the first one, in Mississippi,
Meridian.
I guess it was last year, 2019.
Yep.
And so we were just kind of talking one day. He's like, man, just come do it. And, I wasn't in shape for that. And I'd been shooting for about 15 minutes. And, I was like, all right,
let's go.
Yeah. Which end is the target side? Yeah. And so it was really interesting, man. And I went and I did it, and I wasn't in great shape, and I had sprained the living hell out of my ankle about 12 weeks before. So I did the whole thing in a lace up brace, and I was just like, I'm going to die, but let's do it. And it was one of those things where it's like, I hung in there okay. I wasn't particularly good, but it was like, yeah, man, this is what I need right now. I retired from weightlifting. I didn't have anything specific to train for. And it was this new, it was so far out of my wheelhouse that's what appealed to me. I think it was like, here's something new that I can really push myself for. And it's not I'm coming into it as a complete non-expert for once. I'm tired of being the expert. In weightlifting, as everyone's asking me questions, I want to go and do this new thing where I get to be the new guy, the whole white belt mentality, right? Where I want to learn something new and have that challenge versus having to explain shit to other people. Just give me a minute.
It seems like it falls completely in line with your value system about exploring new,
absolutely.
The physical aspect, the endurance aspect. What is weightlifting relative to what is a 2-day, fitness, shooting, strongman, obstacle course kind of a thing? Total just running, right? Just running. Yeah. Man, love it. Well, I got to ask one more question before we kind of dig into the book. let's take a step out of developing athletes or coaching athletes. Did you ever develop anything, or, because I know we obviously have had certification before, but when you're hiring coaches or you're developing, mentoring, maybe interns or junior coaches, what were some characteristics that you looked for that maybe gave you the signal of like, hey, this guy or this girl is got, good head on their shoulders. They're in it for the right reasons. Did you ever enjoy that process, or,
I found it incredibly frustrating simply because there was such a seeming dearth of people who were eager to work hard and eager to learn. Right. And I don't know if maybe my expectations are unreasonable. I don't think they are. I think there's this weird thing we're experiencing these days where so many people have this sense of entitlement, that they are owed a job,
right,
or that they don't. It's totally okay for them to do the absolute bare minimum, and
right.
They don't want to do anything other than what you have explicitly told them to do. And it's like a constant act of babysitting, right? Like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a micromanager. I don't even want to be a regular manager,
Right.
And so that was tough. But when you find the right person, I think, like you said, it is very obvious. And I think the number one standout thing is their attitude when it comes to being very open to learning and having that eagerness to learn. Like, how can I make this better? How can I learn to do this as well as possible versus how do I skate by with as little effort as possible, right? There's the two far ends of the spectrum there. And that's how I grew up with, I had jobs since I was 11 years old. And I remember distinctly to this day having a boss. I think, I was 15 years old or something. I was working in a bike shop, which I ended up doing for many years in my life. And I had this great boss who was, I'd come encounter some problem that I hadn't encountered before, repairing a bike. And I'd be like, how do you do this? He's like, well, how do you think you do it? And so he would like force me to work through the problems. And I developed that, not only the ability to figure stuff out well, but like the enjoyment, the satisfaction of being able to do that.
Yep.
Yeah. And so it's like when I encounter people who not only are not willing to do that, but don't want to do that, it's just so weird to me. It's like,
it probably grinds your gears, like you're missing the whole.
It's just strange. And it's like, what a sad way to go through life, where it's like you're so uninterested in anything.
Yeah. I get that.
And like, to me, it's like, that's one of the great joys in life, right? Is that new experience that you can really just like become enthralled with and gain so much from that. You would never be able to learn that stuff, even from a book or watching videos. Like, you have to experience it and make the mistakes, but you have to have that eagerness, right?
Yep. Man, I totally get it. I totally get that. I've been faced with some of the exact same challenge. You look at someone and you're like, this should be intriguing. You should be curious about this, or I guess should is a hard word for people to hear these days, but man, well, I've sincerely appreciated hearing about the past. Let's talk about what's coming. So talk about Becoming Tough. What is it?
So this is a new book I'm working on. I just finished it, sent it to the editor a couple days ago. And the idea, I've been kicking this idea around in my head for years and years and years. I took the first notes for this book in 2011. I had to go look it up the other day because I was curious. So that's how long I've been thinking of making this into a book. And it took me a long time, though, to really get started because I couldn't quite figure out what I was trying to get across. Like, what was the point of all this?
Okay.
And really what it came down to eventually was we have this really nebulous idea of what being tough is. And it's very different depending on who you ask. And, you ask one person and it's, they'll focus on resilience in a general sense. Another person's, it's more about physical ability, or they'll focus on a certain type of person, soldier, first responder, elite athlete, and then draw the characteristics based on that stereotypical person.
Okay.
And to me, it was more like, well, hang on, there's so much more to it than that. And what I eventually settled on was, I broke it into 4 essential elements, and that is character, which is who are you, and the supplement to that is, are you secure in that identity? Capability, what are you able to do? Capacity, which I look at as, what are you able to withstand? What are you able to not just survive but thrive through?
Yep.
And then finally, commitment. What are you willing to do? Because those first 3 are meaningless if you're not willing to put them into action,
Yep.
in order to achieve something meaningful. And so the book essentially is broken into those 4 parts, and I go through and examine, what exactly does this mean? Why does it matter? But then, most critically, how do you achieve these things? How do you go from your current state to developing more of these qualities that are going to move you towards this, this state of being tough, which of course exists on a gradient. We all start at one point, we all go to a farther point up the gradient. And so to me, it was interesting in a lot of ways, obviously, but having to actually sit down and articulate it clearly made me have to examine what I believed and the way I looked at things. And,
Sure.
I had a lot of moments where I was like, yeah, I really wasn't clear about this thing. And now that I actually sit down and I can associate it with all these other experiences, now I really understand what I was looking for and what I was trying to get to. And so I've gotten good feedback from it so far for the people who have seen it, but I'm hoping that it is actually a really useful, helpful thing for people. And the final thing I would add about it is that one of the big things, one of the big points that I'm hoping is clear from it is that this state of being tough is not just for our individual benefit and experience. It is really truly for the collective experience of human beings, right? And part of it is, what are you contributing to your immediate community, the world at large, rather than this kind of attitude of like, yeah, it's about me and protecting myself and this is mine. And so that's a big thing that I hope comes across very clearly.
Right.
So I'm sure some people won't like it, but they probably don't.
I'll tell you what, the significant segments that you've been posting, particularly on Instagram, I've grabbed a couple of those quotes and I pulled them across and I've shared them. I've received some really good feedbacks. I guarantee you there's some folks looking forward to that drop.
Yeah.
I don't know when that is. Maybe I've just not read it yet. But if you could use today's platform and our audience and the folks that will inevitably get a chance to see this, and you can speak to either a defining, like a takeaway, either from the book, right, or something you want to make sure and land with like an exclamation point. What message would you send home today? Something that needs to be heard, July of 2020.
Man. I guess if I had to distill it all down to something really straightforward, I think it would have to be that the most critical thing you can do is to learn to be 100% responsible for your own life. And that does not mean, as some people will misinterpret this, that circumstances don't affect, your starting point. They certainly have potential limits on your ultimate ending point, but working with what you have, it is 100% your responsibility to achieve the things you want to achieve and to become the person that you believe you are or believe that you need to be. And that alone right there, if you can really embrace that idea, will change your perspective on virtually everything in your life.
Everything.
And it will really change the way that you approach the problems you encounter. It'll change the way that you react to other people. I mean, it'll change how much enjoyment you get out of a day. Right. You know, and so, like, to me, in my lifetime, you know, the super long 40 years I've been alive, you know, that's always been I think the driver of all the progress that I've made in my life is recognizing that it's my problem, right? Like, I cannot sit around waiting for someone else to take care of this for me, waiting for someone else to tell me it's okay or give me the opportunity. It's if this is what needs to happen, then I better figure out a way to make it happen.
Right. I mean, man, I love it. I totally love it. For those that are watching today, if they're interested in reading more, learning more, reaching out, contacting, emailing, how can they find you? What's the best way?
Becomingtough.com or Instagram. The account is @becomingtough. Okay. That'll have, you know, until the book comes out, that's going to have, you know, quotes and articles and things like that. As far as release date, I don't have it yet. That's up to the publisher. I'm really hoping before the end of the year. But again, I don't control it at this point. And then, of course, catalystathletics.com for everything else. That's kind of the portal for everything that I do. So
awesome, man. Well, Greg, I sincerely appreciate your story, your wisdom, the history. I mean, you go back to the beginning days of when we met, when we first began on this CrossFit journey, and definitely through the landscape of weightlifting. And as an enthusiast of the sport, you know, I'm really excited to see Tactical Games grow. I'm excited to see you as a part of it, and I'm definitely looking forward to the book. So, man, awesome. Thank you.
I appreciate you having me on.
Right on. Awesome. Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, make sure you like our channel, subscribe, and check out our other videos right here.